This is Tu Esquina Filosófica, your philosophical corner. This is podcast number 2 with Todd McDonough.
Hello.
So, in today's podcast, we're going to focus on religion, the role that religion has in the relationship between science and philosophy. We're also going to do a quick overview of the unfolding of this relationship historically. We also interviewed a pastor. The pastor's name is Pastor
Matt Collins,
and he is from Hope Church in Dubuque, Iowa. So we wanted to get an insight of what a practicing pastor thinks about the following questions that we're going to ask. So the way we're going to structure the podcast is going to be first talking about the answers that the Pastor Matt gave to the questions about the relationship of science and religion. Then we are going to sort of analyze these questions, see if we can answer it ourselves, with the overall thesis in mind that I think me and Todd share, which is that materialism can lead to the same conclusions that religion claims it exclusively can lead to. So, to get started, the first question we asked Pastor Matt was how many years he's been a pastor. And Pastor Matt's been a pastor for 35 years, and he's been at Hope Church for 21.
And Hope Church is an evangelical church, so you can compare it to, it has its roots in like Protestantism. They believe in faith alone, by grace alone. They don't see tradition as authoritative as the Catholic Church does.
Mm-hmm. The second question that we asked is, how do you conceive of the relationship between science and religion? And he stated that science is the systematic study of the physical world through observation and experimentation. This means for us to observe or study something, it must be measurable or physical. Science can't really measure emotions, feelings, evil, etc. Sometimes it seems to me that science wanders into areas that it can never answer or measure. For that matter, religion has done the same. Religion is always for the people to make sense of the world around them. Long ago, there was no science as we know. It was only religion. Today, there is a seemingly vast chasm between science and religion. The problem comes in that both seek to answer the same question from a different perspective, causing conflict. I think some interpret that Bible in ways that it was never meant, causing conflict. For example, some use the Bible to make a cause for a flat earth until science corrected this mistake, though some NBA players still claim it's a fact. The Bible was never making that statement. It was a misissue of the Bible. Misuse of the Bible, I apologize. Today, many people have put the Bible and science in conflict with one another in areas of creationism and evolution. I don't see the need to see this conflict if science and correct Bible understanding stay in their lanes. The problem is that we are asking the Bible to answer questions the original audience never conceived. I will add that many great scientists were and are people of faith, so they don't need to be in this conflict. So from this answer, we can kind of extract that he seems to be adhering to some sort of Noma thesis, so non-overlapping magisteria, meaning that religion and science seem to fit in two different domains, although they might seem to try to answer similar questions from different angles, unless one or the other incorrectly infringes on a field that it's not supposed to be infringing in. We're not going to find any sort of conflicting overlap, that if they stay, in a sense, true to their essence, that they can coexist without finding any conflict. The third question that we asked him is, how do you pastorally deal with questions concerning the relationship between science and religion, and what are the questions that arise most often? He states that the ranging questions today fall in the area of creationism and evolution. This is due to some Christians requiring a literal interpretation of Genesis 1 through 2. Many of the so-called problems are not addressed by the text. Genesis wasn't written to us. It was simply written to a group of people who lived thousands of years ago and who never had the questions we are asking. In a sense, he gives a very Wittgensteinian answer and kind of states that we're using completely different games in wrong historical eras. They were in a completely different era, and these questions that we are coming to now were questions that weren't even plausible to think about back then, and even though they might be framed in a way that we can kind of abstract meaning in the phase that we are in now, the meanings weren't the same. They were in a completely different framework than the ones we are on, and it's incorrect to the faith to kind of interpret it in a literal sense, especially using our sort of paradigm of meaning and imposing it on the ones they had.
And so then we asked him, how do you view the unfolding of science and religion in the past, present, and where it's headed in the future? So his response was, science will still continue to explain more and more about the world around us, and religion will continue to address the questions science can't answer, including, why do I even exist? What was the first cause of everything? Is there life after death? And is there an ultimate basis for right and wrong? Science will never be able to answer some of the most important questions of life. In fact, believing that science is the only credible means of truth can wipe out any future hope. For example, if materialism is all there is, then science can't offer us any hope. But religion, Christianity, in my mind, explains things science can't perceive, give hope that science can't measure, and provide an ethic that science can't defend. So essentially, he's saying that science can't offer us any hope, and by this, I assume that he means life after death. If this life is all that there is, and there's nothing to go towards in the end, it's almost like our names being wiped out by the tide coming in and forever being lost in history. So what's the point of doing anything at all? And he also says that spirituality, Christianity in his case, explains what can't be perceived, so a supernatural reality, and then provides an ethic that science can't defend, so a moral code or standard that we can live by, and provides us with the hope, so life after death. And then the final question we asked him what does faith or spirituality add to science? And then what does science add to faith and spirituality? So he said, I think science and faith can work hand in hand. They don't need to be foes. Science answers some of the physical world questions, also giving us a better picture of the Creator in my view. Spirituality, Christianity in my case, answers the longing questions of the heart that science can't. And so to summarize that, he's saying that science answers some of the physical world questions, which gives us a better picture of the Creator. And so spirituality, or Christianity in his case, answers the longing questions of the heart. And these, what he responded as, could be boiled down to origin, destiny, purpose, and morality. So this is what me and Carlos are going to examine. These are the functions that Pastor Matt thinks that religion provides to society or human nature. And so the question we are exploring is, can materialism adequately perform all the functions that are usually prescribed to religion? And so we'll start with the first one, origin.
I think before we start, it'll be helpful to sort of analyze some of the things he said. One of the statements that he makes here is that long ago there was no science as we know it. There was only religion. For everyone who's taken the Science, Faith, and Knowledge class that we're currently in and doing this podcast for, we've read Peter Harrison's book, The Territories of Science and Religion, and can examine that if we historicize the statement, that we see that it is not true, that science and religion were both traditionally considered different types of virtues, the virtue of piety for religion and the virtue of the intellect for science. So they were both subcategories of functions of human life that was connected to human flourishing. And this split of categorizing each as a natural kind came around the same time. So as we start categorizing science in the scientific revolution as sort of its own kind, separate from human flourishing, around the same time do we start seeing the same for religion, and specifically we're referring to Western Christian Abrahamic religions. It's not until a long time after that we start including other, what we consider now to be other forms of religion, and associating them with the word. So I think he is able to see the developing of science as a kind with history, but fails to see the same thing from the point of religion, and how each has sort of developed in a parallel sense as its own kind, how we categorize it in today's dialogues.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we're going to go through these 4 things that Pastor Matt thinks that religion is able to give us, and we're going to explore if they can be explained materially. So we're going to start with origin. So is materialism something that can explain the origin of human life, the origin of the universe, or is this something that solely religion can only do? And so to answer this, we have to know the nature of time in general. And so thinking that everything starts with God, first off the bat, we'll assume a linear relationship of time, so that there's a past, present, and a future, and that there's cause and effect. And so is this the reality in our current conceptions of science and in our material conceptions of science? Well, we're not quite sure yet, and science is agnostic on that issue, because in certain quantum physics realms, we're discovering retrograde causality, where possibly the future could influence the past, so the effect could have an effect on the cause, which is very fascinating to hear. So, and then we also know in science that the Big Bang is the origin of the universe, based on inductive evidence or inductive reasoning. So what was before that? What was before the origin of nature and the universe? Science can't say, because it's outside of the natural system. So it may be that there was nothing before that, or it may be that there was a supernatural cause. So like I said, science is in an intermediary phase. It doesn't claim to know the answer to some questions as religion does. Rather, it chooses to remain agnostic. Religion, however, claims to have the answer already, and this is usually referred to as the God of the gaps argument, which occurs when science doesn't have an answer to something. Religion will assert that the answer or cause must be God.
Yeah, it's a beautiful black box that you can pull out of every time you find yourself in unknown territory. I just see here a clear case of Occam's razor. If we have an explanation through the Big Bang for the existence of basically everything, why add a layer and say that what happened before the Big Bang? Well, okay, you can say there's a God, but it's pretty unfair once you define God in connection to that which nothing greater can be thought, or however the hell you define God, but when you define God as a definition that necessarily places him as the greatest or the first cause or whatever, it's kind of vague, because it eliminates the option of asking, well, why, what created this God, or what came before. It kind of just fills a void that instead of investigating what could actually have came before the Big Bang, it's just attributed in its totality to a God, this vague figure that we afterwards end up adding categories to, maybe correctly or incorrectly, but yeah.
And so the next one that he mentions is religion can explain destiny, or answer questions concerning destiny. And this is also tied into his view that religion gives us hope, and science can't give us hope if it's just materialism. So where is the universe going? What's its overall destiny? Well, we know in science that entropy is a thing, the product of thermodynamics. So the universe is moving towards chaos or disorder. So that's not very hopeful. Doesn't sound very hopeful. And then where are we going as humans? So religion will say that there's life after death, but it really comes down to philosophy and the view of the soul. So in my case, I believe in non-reductive physicalism, that the mind or soul cannot be reduced to the various parts of the brain or body, but can only exist through the relation of the parts. Therefore, when the brain stops functioning, the mind or soul will stop functioning as well, and therefore no life after death, at least not spiritually. So both of these answers of where we are going and where the universe is going don't sound very hopeful, which is likely why individuals gravitate towards religion for this existential comfort. But I think when we dive into his third point, which is purpose, I think it sounds a little more hopeful or meaningful than the destiny part of it does. So we'll get into that. So why do we even exist in the first place? What's the purpose or meaning of it all? So this is really a question of philosophy, because there are no observable phenomenon in which you could point to answer this type of question. The problem...
I would tend to disagree there. I think there is... in a sense, because this question of purpose is inherently connected to the question of essence, and whether there is an essence. I think that if we look at a spoon, what is a spoon? It's a stick with some sort of small bowl connected to it, which helps us pick up stuff. I think that would pretty clearly define a spoon. Now, what the spoon is used for can be an infinite amount of things. It can pick up snow, soup, excrement, like anything, to be honest. So I think that we wrongly question essence by what our essence manifests itself like in the actual process of the manifestation of the essence's life, of the particular essence's life. So in the same way that we wouldn't look at a spoon and say that it has lost its essence because it's not picking up food anymore, why see similar questions attached with humans? Like I would see the essence of a human as simple as the characteristics which separate us from other sorts of animals, non-human animals, and I think that would pretty clearly be our capacity to reason, our capacity to reflect, our capacity to even answer or ask the questions that we're asking, our capacity to care about the question of purpose, the question of origin. I think these things make us specifically human, and the way we manifest themselves in our life, that is where existentialism comes. That's where we have to decide how we do it. But any path we take is going to be a path that's connected to our human essence. The path is not essential. There is no one essential path for humans to take. There's an infinite variety of paths. But the fact that we even have to take...
Do you think there's a limited number of paths? So it's limited by our physical and mental capabilities. Like we can't fly in our current thing.
I mean, of course, but like the question of existentialism of, oh my God, what is my purpose? Is my purpose to do this, do that? Like whatever you choose to do is your purpose, because whatever you're doing, you're manifesting your essential characteristics as a human. Whatever you do, you're gonna have to use your capacity to reason in some aspects more than others. But in every path we take in life, whatever is keeping us from killing ourselves, that's our purpose. That's as simple as that. And that purpose is always going to be connected necessarily to our capabilities of reason. And so like I would see the question of there is no predetermined path for human, or there is no essence, as kind of absurd, because that would be like saying that just because a spoon can do an infinite amount of things, there is no essence of a spoon, right? And I think we most would agree that we can see a spoon and know what the essence is.
The synthesis between essentialism and existentialism that I was thinking is, like, we do have these limits to human nature that we cannot follow an infinite number of paths, but there are various paths that are not wrong inherently. So I can choose to work any type of job that I desire. None of them are a wrong choice. I'm fulfilling a perfectly well purpose, but I can't do certain things outside of my nature.
So the essence is it's connected to the limitations of potentiality that one has. This gets back to the metaphysics class that we took last semester. Essence limits qualitatively, while matter limits quantitatively. So our qualitative limits of essence are, like we obviously can't fly, but we still have the capacity to manifest our essence in an infinite amount of ways within our limited potentialities. So
I see the question of purpose as like creating art. You can create whatever life you want, and some lives might look better than others, but is any art piece inherently wrong, but fulfilling purpose? Its purpose according to this person.
So for the question of is any art piece inherently wrong, are you referring to a moral wrong?
So I'm saying, is there any standard that we should say, this is the exemplary art piece? That would be essentialism. Art is a wide range of things. You can make a horrible song, and still, if that was your intent, it's okay. I mean, or you can make a horrible life.
Well, that would be Platonic essentialism to connect the ideal form of art piece. There's other forms of essentialism that don't really have to do with an ideal thing that we're striving for. Like Aristotelian essentialism just refers to all of the particulars that kind of manifest himself in the whole. There's no like complete ideal or perfect type of thing that which all other living particular types of that thing are striving to be. So when it comes to art, I don't think there would be like an essential art piece that the other ones are striving to get to the level of that goodness. I mean, I don't even necessarily think that all art has a level of purpose that is inherently good. Like when we think of Nazi art, where's the goodness in that, in a sense? But yeah.
And purpose doesn't always have to be tied up with morality either. It could be, if someone's purpose is to do a horrible thing, they can fulfill that purpose. You know?
Yeah, but I would see purpose tied to our essence and
This like a species essence?
Yeah, like our species essence of what I stated, our capacity to reason, reflect. And I think to add to that species essence is capacity to be compassionate for others, to feel empathy, and to love. There's an institute in Japan, Primatology Institute. They came out with a study a few years ago. It was in the 80s, I think. But the study basically said that humans were like weak monkeys, in a sense, that were forced down from the trees and were forced to live in the land with a bunch of very dangerous land animals, predators. And the only way that we were able to survive was because we were able to develop language, a sense of empathy, a sense of community, a sense of collective and collective mentality. So even if we're arguing against essentialism, we have to acknowledge that there's qualities that have helped us develop in evolution and have helped the species maintain alive. And these qualities of sort of collectiveness and love and compassion are all tied into what I would consider to be the human essence. So any sort of purpose that goes against that is detrimental to the essence. It goes in a complete contradiction to human essence. And so I would see that as the road that is wrong. It's definitely a road. And the
it's
road
contradictory to human essence.
It's contradictory to human essence, in at least in my view.
And so moving forward with that, is there an inherent purpose with life? So religion will often say if materialism is true, then life has no purpose. But if a song ends, does that mean the song was less meaningful? Time is a scarce resource, and scarcity is actually the sufficient condition for value. If you have a scarce resource, it makes it more valuable. If we had an infinite amount of time, heaven, afterlife, we wouldn't value the present moment.
I find it so interesting how religious folks make the argument that if there's a limited life, then there is no purpose. You can do whatever you want, but it kind of seems to me intuitively to be the complete contrary. If there is a whole life that you're categorizing as perfect and heavenly after this one, why in the world would I bother doing anything in this life? Why wouldn't I just kill myself and go to the next life? I think it's the fact that we know we have limited time that sort of motivates our everydayness and our capacity to strive for things in our everyday life. And I think that itself is essential to the sort of human species. The idea of growth and flourishing, and that, I think that's connected to the fact that we know that one day it's all going to come to an end, and we want to get to that day having sort of a level of contentment about how much growth and flourishing we're able to do in our life.
So we'll move on to his next point, morality. He thinks that can only come from religion. And usually in religion, people will say there's either divine command theory or natural law theory, and God establishes this law inside of us. And this is where we get our concepts of right and wrong. But as you know, Carlos, we had a good 3-hour discussion yesterday about morality. We should have recorded it. But
Yep.
In short, I determined that good and evil do not exist in isolated objects, but only in relation to other objects. And the analogy I used is that no single music note, so you can imagine just pressing each key on a piano keyboard, none of them will sound dissonant. They all sound good on themselves. The only way a chord or a note will sound bad is in relation to other chords. So you get 2 or more piano notes in there, and they may sound harmonious or dissonant. So,
But I think even using that example, we see that once we just hit one note, there is no melody. You might find something shallow as rhythm, but there is no melody.
Mm-hmm.
In order to find the goodness, you need to be also in relation to other notes or in relation to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So to connect that to human morality, goodness is intrinsically connected to the relationship you have in community, the role you play in community, and thus the contrary of goodness or the negation of goodness, whether we want to call, however we want to define evil, is when you're in community but acting in a sense as if you're not, or being detrimental to that community and the flourishing of it, or when you're prioritizing individual flourishing over community flourishing.
So this relation concept, this includes the act's relation to its intention and the act's relation to the object that is being acted upon and any other factors involved. So each action can only be understood as good or evil in relation to its situation, circumstance, context. And the problem is we can't isolate these actions because they lose their moral value when we do that. Do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I have a mouthful of Skittles though, I'm sorry. But yeah, I wouldn't fall into that sort of goodness in action only as a result of the circumstance. I think goodness in action might be vague, but it has to be connected to, once again, these essential capabilities of our species.
Can you name one single act that is universally morally wrong at all times in all places?
Killing your kid. Killing an innocent person.
Okay, so what are the parts of that circumstance? Killing your kid. We have the object that is being acted upon, your kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have killing. Killing could be good in other circumstances. Your kid, it depends what he did, but
yeah, but that's a different form of killing. What you're talking about there.
Yeah.
You're equating the killing that you.
We have a name for it, murder. That's the improper relation.
Then murder. right?
Mhm.
Murder is wrong in all circumstances. So,
But
like,
murder is the court, it's not the note. Killing is the note.
but killing is just a definition of the act of taking someone else's life. It's just a specific definition according to it, because you're also killing when you kill your kid, but it's labeled different as a different form of killing. So I would wonder if there is an essential form of killing that makes it
Because you could swap out the kid
virtuous.
with a axe murderer, and now the act is right because you just saved the town or whatever. See the context in which the act takes place.
I wouldn't say it's right. I would say that it's less wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always a level of not righteousness connected in the killing of someone. It's just that there's some non-righteousness that just end there and end in a pure evil, and there's others that are intrinsically connected to a level of good that might make it worth it to produce a level of bad initially. So if we're faced with an intruder in a house who is trying to kill our family and we kill them, like we still took a life. There's still intrinsically something wrong with what we did, but the overall context of how we did it.
Why
makes
is it wrong
worth
in that situation? Because killing is inherently wrong.
I would say killing is inherently wrong. What makes it worthwhile within a good is when the good transcends the level of wrong that the killing produced. So when the good overrides that level of wrong. So it's the same thing with lying. Like I would see lying as wrong, but if you have a Nazi officer at your house asking you if you have Jews upstairs, then although that lie is sort of wrong, because you're not respecting the other person's autonomy and dignity as a human being.
Do you think it's wrong to kill plants and animals for our sustenance?
Let me finish. But
yeah, sorry.
For the lie, like, it's connected to a greater good, which is to let the Jewish people you're hiding upstairs live. So the small evil or the evil of the lie, once it's transcended by another good, then it becomes correct. But we can't see that and think that act is correct in that circumstance, because it's still not. It's just overridden by the goodness that that certain level of evil will produce. What was your question?
I was just asking, so we kill plants and animals in order to survive. We need to eat, right? And so in that context, we are killing because we didn't have to kill this thing. We could have killed another thing, but we have to kill. And so in this context, killing is okay.
Maybe 400 years ago when we were just in the jungle and not 400, a little more, a little more. We weren't just on jungles 400 years ago, but when we knew that our sustenance depended on which animal we can kill and how quick we can kill one and eat one. But we are at a point in time where we can all survive very nutritious lifestyles, some might even argue healthier lifestyles, without necessarily doing that act of killing. So that transcendent goodness that came with the killing of an animal, per se, it's not there anymore. And thus I would personally, I don't try to impose this on anyone, but I would personally consider that an evil that I at least I don't partake in. As for plants, I mean, there's Jains, which are, I think, in India, who don't eat anything that is alive, so they don't kill plants either. I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point like that. Right now, it seems that if we have transcended the need to eat animals, maybe at some point we might transcend the need to eat plants, and there might be a moral theory for that. As for now, we're still in that stage that we were, for example, with animals 2,000 years ago, where we needed to kill them in order to survive because we didn't have a GNC where we can buy B12 or plant-based protein powder or anything like that. or multivitamins or stuff like that. So, yeah.
I think some of the main issues that I have with the religious conception of morality is that they try to categorize things and fit like actions into neat tight boxes when life isn't like that. It's much more in relation to other things, taking part in a system. You have to examine the circumstances. And then also they place a hierarchy on certain actions. And that could be debatable too. There's some times where valuing someone's autonomy, choice, self-determination is more important than their life even. Like if somebody wants to choose to die on a mountaintop, that's their last dying wish. But they didn't have to die. It'd be assisted suicide kind of. Would that trump their life in that sense? Because they're choosing that this would satisfy their life the most.
So what you're saying is that there's no case where an action is intrinsically better than another to make it hierarchical, hierarchically
it's
structured.
An action is better or worse in relative to the circumstances of other actions. And so they change spots all the time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd probably disagree. I would see some actions inherently more good than others, and I would see the goodness of it in connection to our capacity for compassion and for reason. So many actions, for example, that might seem very compassionate are not entrenched in reason. So an action that is very rational and has a little bit of compassion might be higher in the hierarchy of goodness, I guess, than that action, even though one might value compassion over reason in their own hierarchy. But I definitely do think that there's different levels of goodness. I think that that loving is a lot better than hating. So I would believe in hierarchy. Now, like think of sports.
Do you think
there's a
giving
hierarchy
is always good?
There's a hierarchy in teams, but that doesn't mean that the first place team might not lose to the third place team every once in a while. That doesn't mean that sense of superior goodness might have been applied in an area where, in order to find a real transcendent goodness, there needed to be a level of lesser good entrenched, and it applied its complete moral goodness in a wrong way. Like, part of being good is understanding when you need to not be so good in a sense, when you need to show strengths or other characteristics that might not be connected to those higher levels of good. So yeah, I mean, I could see a first place team that's intrinsically better than another team lose to that other team in a certain circumstance, but that doesn't mean that team is still not better.
Well, we could probably go on and on about morality for a long time. I know I'm still working on my conception of it.
We probably will for the rest of our lives too.
But as you can see, all the points we listed, there's a lot of ways to conceive that it could be materialistic and not religion.
Yeah, I definitely think that that the sense of exclusiveness for objective morality that religion, at least most religions, tend to claim, I wouldn't see that as truthful. I think we can find objective senses of ethics and morality that are connected just to materialism and that don't have to adhere to any form of transcendence. And we also have to see what we mean by transcendence, because a religious person might say, well, Carlos, the love and community that you're talking about being essential to the human species, that is transcendence, and that is God. Some of the earlier Christian stuff that I've read, it focuses on God being love.
And I do think that's useful. That is a useful thing that religion provides, is it gives an overview of the archetypal human experience. It displays our psychology in written form. It shows what we're going through, and we're putting it into poetry and to stories, and we're saying this is the human experience written down.
I definitely do think it gets a lot of the human essence right. I tend to have a Feuerbachian conception, and I see our religion manifesting our essence, but in a transcendent that we will never be able to fully get to in its totality. But the principles that are attached to God, love, will, reason, right? Those are intrinsically, I would say, essentially human principles that we don't manifest them perfectly, and we might doubt ourselves when we don't, whether we actually can. But that's what religion sort of seems to do. It alienates these things into a transcendent God. But the beauty of Christianity is that it gives it back to us in the Corpus Christi. When God dies, these qualities are left in the community, and we're the community that is bounded by love of God, and these qualities are given back to us. Still in an alienated manner, because they're God's properties given to us and not our properties and us manifesting them. But I think at the end the result is essentially the same. The path that religion, or at least Christianity, seems to be aiming at, I think it's connected to the essence of humans. And I wouldn't see, even if we analyze it evolutionarily or through science, as the capabilities that help them survive, and we define that as our essence, I would still not see that as overlappingly conflictive with religion. So I do agree that religion, Christianity, which is what we're referring to when we say religion, did get a lot right when it comes to human essence. They also got a lot wrong, and maybe Pastor Matt is right that a lot of what they got wrong was based on wrongful interpretations of the text, and imposing specific historical paradigms on a text from a completely different historical paradigm. But there's definitely a lot going on that I think will definitely map into a developed materialistic form of ethic and conception of human essence.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here. As you can see, just to summarize, we looked at Pastor Matt's explanations for what kinds of questions religion can answer. And so we went over how origin, destiny, purpose, and morality can be explained materialistically. And hopefully we showed that clearly. Do you have any other closing words, Carlos?
I think I would agree with the dynamic relationship that Pastor Matt labels, or his the Noma thesis, that they both don't overlap conflictingly, and then when they do is when one or the other sort of infringes wrongly on a field that it has no say in. So I think that what is essential to religion, at least Christianity, is the path, right? Following the path of Jesus and loving your neighbor agapically. Now, when you're telling me the whole story behind it, like the story is just sort of pieces to hold together the essence of what it's really trying to tell you, which is the way, right? When this story infringes on science, I don't think it's wrong to sort of shift it, and I think in a sense that's what Pastor Matt was kind of getting at, that each thing has its essence that it has developed in its process of becoming its own kind, because as yes, they might have both been virtues of human beings, right, in its origin and developed in its own kind. But I gave an example a while back that it's like a bookshelf. If you have 10 books in the bookshelf, you're not going to be able to structure it. It's all going to be part of one shelf or whatever. But if you start getting hundreds of books, you're going to be able to structure them between philosophy books. You're going to be able to structure them historically. You're going to be able to structure them in a bunch of different ways that you weren't capable of doing it before. Our expansive capacities in these fields have given us the opportunity to categorize both as independent fields of study and independent things. Now, that doesn't mean that there are natural kinds, but they are definitely kinds and categories. So I would see these two current formulations of these kinds as in the same way as Pastor Matt would, as in its essence not overlapping conflictingly with the other. And philosophy just plays the middle realm that analyzes critically both essences, the relationship and and everything else. I think of philosophy in the traditional sense of critically examining everything, right? Even more so than just its own field. I think that this critical examining of everything is more essential to philosophy than any other form of philosophical development, which, although I obviously consider all of that into the kind that is philosophy, but the category of philosophy, the essence of philosophy is a critical examination of everything around, and that's religion and science, and that's why we're able to do this podcast and talk about these things through the mediator of philosophy.
And then one last closing comment I have is, I guess my view on it is, the goal is to just be a good person, act ethically, and if Christianity or any other religion for that matter is how you get there, if that's the path you choose, I don't see any problem with it. I choose to just skip the religious path and just try to find a material morality, but as long as you get there, that's fine by me. But one of the problems is I have that sometimes religion makes exclusive claims, or like saying this is the only way, and then it judges those that choose different paths, and that's one problem I have with it. And then another thing is religion seems to focus on the supernatural, and that seems to be speculation, questions we just can't know about, and for that reason I just choose to remain agnostic on those issues.
And then again, we fall into the question that Pastor Matt brought up, which is, to what level are these responses just misusage of the actual religion and the text? Because I know of a few theologians that I have talked to, and I've told them I kind of adhere to the same ethic as Catholicism or Christianity, but I don't believe, and they're perfectly acceptive of that, and they say that since I'm following the path on Judgment Day, whatever, that's all that really matters. Like Himes, the Himes text that introduces Catholicism talks about on Judgment Day, all that will matter is whether you followed the path of loving thy neighbor, right? This has no implications on whether you did any form of Eucharist, whether you went to church, whether you actually believed in God. As long as you loved other people and acted in that, as long as you were a good person, like what you're talking about, those are the only principles that I think the essence of religion would consider. And anyone who would try to break away from that or separate you because you don't believe specifically in the story that's around the essence, I think that would be a misusage of the essence of religion, and an attack of that wouldn't be an attack towards the actual essence of religion, but rather towards the story and the people unfolding the story around the essence of that religion.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Todd. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, thumbs down if you didn't. Please don't do that, but whatever. Engage in the comment section. And on this video, I'm going to try to divide the sections between the summarizing and philosophizing that came at the end. Thank you, and this has been an episode of Tu Esquina Filosófica, podcast number 2.